Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, into the one and only Straight Facts Homie podcast edition. We have to get to you our knee-jerk reaction from the NFL draft. Obviously, a big trade in the week. One of the greatest tight ends at his position comes out of retirement and, of course, joins his buddy down south. So much to get to. My name is Mason Souza. You see John Lyons there, Dirty Water Media, a regular on 95 The Sports Hub. He's just a sports expertise, so you know what he's talking about. Walter Sabina is there as well, Brains at TCAM TV, co-host of the Straight Facts Homie podcast, and you can see that on Vimeo. We just did our part 1 special as well, and you're watching us right now on YouTube. If not, go there. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, we are simulcasting right now. So go to YouTube, Straight Facts Homie. I guess we'll call this, draft recap / Gronk, because that's what we're going to talk about, guys. How are you doing? Day 1 has come and gone. I think it just ended 5 minutes ago, as it is 9:30 in the morning currently. I have some things to vent about that. The production was okay for what it was, but can we move it along? Anyway, besides the point, how are you guys doing? How'd you enjoy the week that was in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it was enjoyable. I mean, it was good to at least have something with one of the, 4 major sports have some sort of event, even though it wasn't a game, wasn't a practice, just some sort of event. And obviously, with the hurdles they had to go through technically, at least they got everything and everything went okay and nothing got hacked. That's really the bar I was setting, was that this doesn't be a disaster. It was not a disaster, so I feel okay about it. And looking forward to rounds 2 and 3 tonight. Hopefully it's kind of a little more smooth sailing as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's the first time in a month that, we haven't watched any sort of replay from any sporting event. So it was good to see the NFL put this on, all things considered, everyone remotely. We were expecting a lot more problems than we saw, maybe a bit of latency here and there with a bit of silence or people talking over one another. But other than that, I think the production quality was well, and it was finally good to actually be pumped up to sit and watch something, sports related that was live instead of a replay.
We'll get to the draft itself in a minute. We'd like to begin with the big trade early in the week before round 1 began. But you mentioned the latency. Do you remember? I don't know if it was the 3rd offensive tackle or the 4th offensive tackle. Were you guys watching ESPN, NFL Network, or switching back and forth?
Yeah, ESPN.
Yeah, mostly ESPN.
Okay, so I hope you saw this one. Was it like the 9th, 10th pick? Trey Wingo was trying to be funny, telling a funny story about one of the offensive tackles. The 6 other guys are in the box, whether it was Irvin, Booger, Kuiper, et cetera, et cetera. He told the story, waiting for a response. 9 seconds of silence. I recorded this because I laughed so hard. And he's like, all right, moving on to – it was so great. But, yeah, the latency was hilarious. Robot Goodell. Oh my God, this guy is so embarrassing. But besides the point, like I said, we'll get to the draft in a second. How about Mr. One, Rob Gronkowski, the 24/7 champion of the WWE himself? Maybe he got furloughed, maybe he got laid off, and he's like, you know what? Let me give this football thing a go again, because he has come out of retirement. He's kind of like Triple H. He goes into retirement, comes back out of retirement and then tries to bury someone. He buries O.J. Howard on the depth chart. So he joins Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. How about that? Brady and Gronk reunite this week. It would seem like it all happened in 1 hour. It was speculation and rumor, and then all of a sudden it became official 45 minutes later. It was unbelievable. Gronk and Tom Brady are Buccaneers, guys.
Yeah, and I think that, not to cut you off, Walter, some more ESPN technical difficulties there, I guess. But, to me, I'm okay. He was never going to play here again. So to get a 4th-round pick for a guy that otherwise would just be in his living room, I can deal with. I mean, hey, would I like to have got a 3rd-round pick? Sure. If we were making, and we all know the deal that was in place after, the 2017 season, where they could have got a 1st and a 2nd-round pick for Gronk in a 2nd. Obviously, that's a great deal, but also we got to remember at that time, Gronk had just played lights out. He had an amazing Super Bowl, caught what at the time was the go-ahead touchdown in the Super Bowl. He was pretty well healthy, at least overall. Didn't have, some of the same hobbles that he had in 2018. So to, get something like that at this point, obviously, is unrealistic. So to get at least something, you know, a 4th-round pick for a guy that, like I said, otherwise would have just been sitting at home. You know, I can deal with it. It's going to sting a little bit next September and October when we see Brady and Gronk hooking up for a few more touchdowns. But, you know, I think business-wise, it was better to just get something for him than try to have him come back, force his release, mess with the salary cap, and then you get nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, Gronk coming back, and like you said, he wasn't going to play for the Patriots. He only wanted to play with Tom Brady, and instead of taking on his $10 million or $10+ million deal that he had left on his contract, and then having to play around with other guys, Bill just said, you know, I don't want to deal with this. You know, at first I thought maybe we could have got a little more, but again, we had little to no leverage. So get that 7th out of here, bring in a 4th, and see what Bill can do. I don't know if I'm really too optimistic with what that 4th rounder will turn into, but at least it's better than a 7th rounder.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. If I'm being fair, and we'll get to Bill Belichick a little bit later, we talked about this on the podcast in the past. I am player over coach, and I am fading away from Bill Belichick fast. But if I'm being fair, I agree. You know, to get a 4th-round pick, we saw what he was. He was a shell of himself in his final year. Obviously, he had that big play to lead to the only touchdown in Super Bowl 53. Out of the game for a year. He's taking marijuana products. Obviously, the CBA allows, to a degree, I believe, that you won't be suspended if you take, you know, some of these, whatever, illegally stuff. But if it helped him, it helped him. And he claimed that all he needed was a year, and he's feeling a lot better. We'll see how he feels like a month into the season, if he's, you know, banged up Gronk like last season, because I don't know if he can take his product during the season, unless he just wants to, you know, pay fines throughout the whole season, which totally could be, because he's obviously still, that's why the Patriots trade him. He was under contract until, I believe, this season, upcoming
this would be
season.
His last year, yeah.
Right. So he left $10 million on the table last year. And, you know, the famous quote from Gronk is like, I haven't spent any of my playing money. It's just marketing money, which the big caveman is a brilliant businessman. So good for him. You know, to have all the leverage to, like, you know what, I'm leaving multi-millions of dollars on the table. I'm going to walk away. But in the end, I'm still going to join Tom Brady. It's not with you, Bill Belichick. Do you guys agree with that? That it's like, listen, obviously I agree that he was banged up. He was crying at that press conference talking about he is joined with CBD Medic, et cetera, et cetera. But it seemed like, you know what, I don't want to play for you, Bill. You know, if I'm still under the Patriots, okay, but trade me, you know. And if it's with Tom Brady, that's probably a benefit. But even if it was somewhere else, I think that would still entice him, because, you know, he still has the fire for football. So I think it was going to be anywhere but with Bill Belichick as head coach, because you mentioned, John, the trade was set to Detroit. He made that public after the week 3 loss. Like, yeah, that happened, and Brady's my quarterback. So I'm not, you know, I demanded to hold out or whatever happened. So the tension was there with the coach 3 years ago. So, and obviously I believe that has remained. So long story short, Gronk returning, not with the Patriots, not with Bill Belichick, but with Tom Brady. Do you guys agree that, you know, that tension kind of with Bill is one of the reasons why Gronk didn't play last season?
Yeah, I think there's something there, because all of a sudden now Gronk's like, you know, I saw this opportunity to finally come back. Obviously, with the new collective bargaining agreement, allowing him to use his products opens up the door a lot more for him. But I'm curious, if the Patriots had next year's cap room this year and they were to re-sign Brady, and Brady reached out to Gronk and said, hey, you know, with this new CBA, you're allowed to use this. I could use another weapon. Do you want to come back here? You know, who knows with what's going on behind the scenes, how Bill Belichick runs things there. But down in Tampa, they're all loose. I mean, we've seen Brady all over the news. Brady was in the pre-draft, you know, Zoom call with Rich Eisen and all these other guys opening up and talking. Who knows? He has never done that in a New England Patriots uniform. So I feel like there's just more opportunity to open up and really be yourself down in Tampa. So that's something that they didn't have in New England. So I think that's kind of why they just wanted to be themselves and be more open down in Tampa Bay. So maybe that's why they kind of colluded down there.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think the biggest reason Gronk walked away for that 1 year was the physical stuff. I mean, he had talked about it even the previous year. He kind of was off the reservation for the few months after that Eagles Super Bowl, just kind of doing his own thing, then said, okay, I'm going to come back. And you could tell that he was not fully himself in 2018. He had a great, fourth quarter and overtime against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. He had a really good Super Bowl. But for the balance of the year, you could tell physically he just wasn't himself. It wasn't, necessarily anything he could control. He just wasn't himself. But I think that, like Walter said, if Brady stays, then I think Gronk still might have come back. But I think he was more willing to go to Tampa Bay than he would have been to come back to New England, if that makes sense. I don't think he closed the door completely on New England. And if we're being fair, too, the Patriots and Belichick treated Gronk a lot better than they treat a lot of other players. I mean, they gave him a big extension, when he was still on his rookie contract. They gave him a raise in 2018 and for what would have been 2019 had he played, without, making him add a bunch of extra years on his deal. We all remember the joint press releases they had with him about injuries and sticking up for him, not coming back as quick as some people wanted. So I think that, Gronk maybe got sick of some of the hard coaching. I won't argue that. But I do think that if Brady was here, I don't think he would have just said, well, screw Bill, I'm not coming back, because I do think the Patriots actually gave him a little more leeway than, they would have the run-of-the-mill play, or even some of the good players they've had. I mean, they didn't give this leeway with a lot of the good players. They didn't give it with, Richard Seymour or Mike Vrabel or some other guys they just kind of shipped off. So to me, I think it was more likely he would come back if Brady left, but I don't think it would have been 100% slam shut if Brady had stayed. I think the physical stuff was the biggest reason for the year off.
I agree.
Just one more point real quick. You look at, as John, you mentioned how they gave a lot of leeway and how they were really good to Gronkowski. Even when retirement peaked its head out more and more, even the year that he did retire, we had an opportunity to go get Jared Cook. And it's not like Bill Belichick threw a deadline down on Gronkowski saying, either you make this decision by this point so we can move on. They sort of gave Gronk the opportunity to, weigh out his options and either come back or retire. Ultimately, he ended up retiring, and it cost us an opportunity at Jared Cook. But it's not like they threw down a hard deadline on him and said,
right,
make this decision now. We're going to let you, take your time and make the right choice for yourself.
Right, and if you think about it, they got screwed by Gronk in that situation, and not necessarily that he was doing it intentionally. It's a big decision. He was taking a long time, but if he retires, 3 weeks earlier, they get Jared Cook, and maybe their 2019 season is a little bit different. I'm not saying they would have won the Super Bowl because they had Jared Cook, but a lot of the struggles we saw offensively, I mean, he probably would have helped alleviate some of those. And they didn't, and they also didn't necessarily hold it against him now. They weren't petty about like, hey, why don't you force yourself back? We're not going to trade you to Tampa Bay. They facilitated it. They made it happen. So I think it's one of those things that it would have been great to have him back here, but they got something for a guy that was, like I said, going to sit at home. So I guess it's just another way to turn the page into the next decade and next phase of the program.
I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have knee-jerk reaction to the round one of the NFL draft that took 9 hours. But John, I disagree with the fact that the quote-unquote Gronk screwed Bill Caserio on the Patriots because you tried to trade him. There's got to be writing on the wall at this point. I haven't seen a Patriot come out publicly and say, "Yeah, this happened. The inner workings. They tried to do a transaction with me." Bill Belichick scoffs and spits in the face of reporters that try to ask about transaction, or if someone's on the roster, they'll say, "Yeah, we'll give you a write up later today," and do that evil smile at someone. They should have drafted a tight end. They should have drafted a tight end or went for someone and not waited for Gronk to make a decision because they knew uncertainty was there. So prepare yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. Ever since they drafted Gronk, I don't think they drafted a tight end in the first 5 rounds since then.
Correct.
So, Gronk and Hernandez in that same draft. So that I think is a completely fair point, and there's a lot of merit. Even especially you look at 2016, they win the Super Bowl with an injured Gronk. He's not even on the field. 2017, he's great, but at some point you would figure in one of those years you would maybe draft a guy that's gonna, replace him. But I think both things can be true. Yeah, they probably should have prepared better with a younger player, but by the time the Super Bowl happened against the Rams, Gronk probably knew he was going to retire, and he still waited 6 more weeks when they couldn't get then the stopgap measure in Jared Cook. So I think you easily, could put some blame on both sides there because Patriots should have been more prepared, but Gronk also could have made it a little bit easier for them when the time did come.
There you go. Well said. That's Rob Gronkowski going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a 4th-round pick. The Patriots still would have to give up a 7th in return. The precedent, I believe, the last time this happened was Marshawn Lynch coming out of retirement. I believe they gave up a 5th when he went to the
I
Raiders.
think that's right.
So, obviously we'll see if they are at kind of similar of where they are in their career. If field rust is a real thing with Gronk, obviously, with months to determine until the NFL season begins. So I guess that means we would think, okay, then does that mean O.J. Howard is coming to New England? What's the deal with him? GM Jason Light of the Bucs said, no, we're excited to have O.J. and Gronk pair together. Why wouldn't you have all the most talented players at that same position on the field together? I mean, I don't know, Jason, because Arians didn't give him the ball at all last season, but, we'll see if that is true or not. Maybe that's just fodder. Maybe he will be traded in the next couple rounds of the NFL draft. We will see. But right now they have, let's see, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Howard, Cameron Brate. They just got hopefully their franchise tackle, which we'll get to momentarily, Tristan Wirfs. And obviously some guy named Tom Brady. So the Bucs are looking up at this point as Tom Brady is barging into other people's homes, and Tampa Bay fitting right in over there. Any thoughts about that, or do you want to just move on to the NFL draft?
I think we're good to get into the draft. I'm not a big
instead of
breaking in guy.
Instead of Tom Brady breaking and entering in Tampa Bay, look, this guy has totally changed. What is up with him? He goes to Tampa and he just breaks the rules. Goes in the closed parks. What's with this guy? Anyway, the NFL draft was Thursday night, 1st round. It lasted 6 hours, as I mentioned before. Couple trades, not until the 13th pick, so it was a little slow. Obviously, virtual draft setting like this. But let me hear from you guys. What was your biggest takeaway? We'll get to a lot of things. Obviously, the Patriots trading out, the Packers taking a certain position, a lot of things in between in the first 10 picks that may or may have not been the right decisions for some teams. What stood out most to you guys in round 1?
For me, just looking at the top 10, going to number 4 with the New York Giants, either they could take best available, which at the time was Isaiah Simmons. They ended up going Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from Georgia, which then left a question mark for where Isaiah Simmons was going to land. You figured the Dolphins and Chargers would each take a quarterback. Carolina Panthers probably could have dropped there. They ended up taking Derek Brown, D-tackle at Auburn, and then that left the door open for the Arizona Cardinals. They had a lot of directions they could go, shore up their offensive line, but they went with the best available guy. They took Isaiah Simmons. So to put him, a versatile guy who's played all over the field, he's listed at linebacker, but if you saw the graphic on ESPN, he played like 220 snaps out at cornerback, the nickelback. So he can play anywhere on the field. So the Arizona Cardinals, I think, at that time, get the best available player in the draft and a guy that they can put all over the field for them. So I think that was a very good pickup for the Cardinals.
Yeah, and one thing I actually noticed, which not necessarily always happens, is, we had several teams, I think 3 different teams that had multiple picks in the first round. And I felt that each of those teams had a pretty good night, overall. I mean, you look at Miami drafting, Tua, who, maybe he's a year project, but at the end of it, I think he could end up being, a franchise quarterback, the guy they've been, searching for since Dan Marino. They also get a really good cover corner at the end of the first round. In between that, Austin Jackson, you're going to need protection for Tua, so good offensive tackle there. I like what Jacksonville did. I mean, they lose Jalen Ramsey, so they're able to pick up C.J. Henderson almost. I'm not saying he's going to walk in and be Jalen Ramsey, but it's a good replacement. And they get another pass rusher as well. So I think these teams that had multiple picks, I actually kind of liked what a lot of them did. The Chargers, to walk away with Justin Herbert and Kenneth Murray, I think that's a really good first round right there. So, I was impressed with – it seems to me, you hear a lot of teams are looking at more film this year than ever before because they've been stuck around. And to me, it seems like that paid off. At least you see it in these teams that took multiple players. It definitely, seems to have paid off. And I know we'll get to this in a minute, but the run on offensive tackles and wide receivers was quite the show from about, pick 4 to pick 25. It seemed like every other pick was one of those 2 just about.
Yeah, I agree with the fact, John, of you saying, everyone's staying inside, let's look at film. And I was thinking about that this could go the opposite way. Could we be looking at this draft 3 years from now, like what a terrible draft from a GM perspective this 2020 draft was? But obviously, we don't know. You know, we're just looking at our rankings and what we see as straight facts, homie professionals of seeing all these prospects coming out of college. But yeah, it didn't seem like there were a lot of reaches. Maybe there was the Raiders taking the cornerback Damon Arnett. You know, that was believed to be, maybe he was like the 6th or 7th best corner, and that was the 3rd corner taken. But other than that, there really wasn't a lot. The last pick, the Chiefs taken neither DeAndre Swift or Jonathan Taylor, taken a running back that I didn't even know. What, Clyde Solaire, I believe his name was. He must be a pass catcher.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, one thing, the Chiefs obviously won the Super Bowl, so they're really good.
Yes.
But the one thing they were missing to me was that dynamic pass-catching running back that they had in Kareem Hunt. Now, their running backs were fine last year. I'm not saying they were bad, but I think this is an attempt to say, hey, we have a really good team. We're bringing most of our starters back. What's one area where we're like, hey, we really want this guy? And the other thing, I mean, I look at the Chiefs, okay, Chris Jones wants a new contract. Maybe they want to address the defensive line, but there's a lot of good defensive linemen in the draft. Maybe that's something that they can feel they can do later, whereas this was the top running back to fill that one spot that they think that they're just a little bit away from repeating as Super Bowl champs.
As for the San Francisco 49ers, I personally think they won the first round. You know, obviously when you have 3 picks, that's, you know, and you ignore all the noise and you take Tua at 5, I believe that was the right decision to take Tua over.
I mean, the Dolphins.
What did I say? The 49ers?
49ers, yeah.
Yeah, talking about the Dolphins, I meant
49ers had a good first round too.
That's what I mean. I was going to say the 49ers had a tremendous first round, taking wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, you know, to obviously with Emmanuel Sanders leaving, getting a couple trades in there, moving down one spot to grab number 117. So, and you know,
and they still got Javon Kinlaw out of it, who's probably the guy they wanted anyway.
Exactly. So I don't know. Maybe the Bucs were scared about someone else trading with the 49ers. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, you gave up a 4th to Gronk. Now you're giving up another 4th to move up one spot. But, you know, if Wirfs was their guy and they were hoping the 4th tackle was going to be swiped, then whatever. You do what you got to do. So that's fine. But, yeah, the 49ers wheeling and dealing. They move back up, as I mentioned, to take Ayuk. Fast wide receiver there. Yeah, you mentioned the wide receivers. 5 of them went by number 22. The Eagles taken not Justin Jefferson, but Jalen Reagor at a TCU, maybe hit the new Deshaun Jackson. And next pick, Vikings take the LSU wide receiver Justin Jefferson. But the next pick, guys, you know how this comes back to the Patriots. Number 23. There was only one trade. We're like, all right, this is cool. Let's move this along, even though it's still going slow as all hell. I remember at one point Trey Wingo said, we are moving at warp speed. Like, dude, it's a 15th pick. We're 3.5 hours in. What are you talking about?
It happens every year, too.
So, anyway, that moved on. And then number 23, here we go. It was like 10:55. Finally, here we go. Patriots fans, we lose Mookie Betts. We lose Tom Brady. We're all stuck at home. That's all right. We got the first-round pick. We got the next guy for the next 10 years, the franchise guy, and Bill Belichick makes his 78th draft day trade of his career. Trades back out of the first round. And listen, Bill, come on, man. Come on, man. You know, you give away Gronk for pennies. You let Brady walk. You don't get nothing in return. This was our entertainment to get a first-round pick, a guy that was going to be on the team for the next 10, 12 years. And you want your precious second-round pick so bad, you trade it to the Chargers. You get a 37th. So maybe even in Bill's crazy mind, he knew, you know what? A special teamer in the first round was just a little too early. I'm going to move until the second round and take my gunner. So that's what Bill Belichick does. The Patriots, at the moment, have the most remaining picks in the NFL draft, and I can't wait for them to trade half of them until the 2021 NFL draft. There's my little Patriots rant.
Yeah, I mean, the trade itself, I was fine with, because I think if you look at 37, there's several guys. First of all, I think it says number one, I think it says they believe in Jarrett Stidham, because otherwise they probably would have sat at 23 and taken a quarterback, or traded back but stayed in the first round and probably taken a quarterback. So that'll be definitively answered at 37, because if they don't take a quarterback by 37, then I think they believe in Stidham, because otherwise they would have. So I think that's the first thing. Second of all, I mean, I'm okay with them trading back if they have a particular one or two players in mind. Like if they want to get Cole Kmet out of Notre Dame and they're like, hey, we can get him at 37 and pick up a couple extra assets, then I'm okay with it. You know, if there's another player. But also with that becomes risk, right? Like let's say they wanted Brandon Ayuk, they wanted Kenneth Murray, you know, those guys are gone now. So it's going to have to be, to me, you don't make that trade unless there's two or three guys that you definitely want, that you definitely believe at least one, if not two, will be there at 37. So I think, you know, we're going to see them pick at 37, and I feel like whoever they pick at 37 should be a guy that they liked at 23. And if it's not, then it's a failure. But I don't see them making the move unless there is going to be a guy there, you know, that at 37 that they would have taken at 23 anyway.
Yeah, and us three were communicating throughout the entire first round, and I believe, Mason, right after the Jacksonville Jaguars had selected, or excuse me, the Eagles had selected at 21, Jalen Reagor, wide receiver. When it got to the Minnesota pick, you had texted me saying the Patriots traded. And this was a full entire pick before the Patriots were on the clock.
Yeah, so
and
sorry.
It makes me wonder if the Patriots had Jalen Reagor on their watch list, maybe selecting a wide receiver with that first round pick that didn't get to them. So instead of maybe reaching for another one of these wide receivers that they had on their list, they just decided to trade down. I think it was Adam Schefter tweeted out that the Patriots still think they can get their guy at 37 that they thought they were going to get at 23. Now, I don't know if that would have been a reach at 23, or maybe one of the other guys went before they expected him to get to them. But we'll see if they're going to go, if, you know, what I'm thinking is correct, and that they wanted a wide receiver, that trading down with a couple of these other wide receivers that are still on the board. You know, you got a Denzel Mims from Baylor, or maybe if one of their other guys drops to them at 37, what they do there. But I thought it was interesting that they traded their pick, a whole pick, before they even got on the clock.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the five or so picks that went in front of them, you know, Austin Jackson goes, Kayvon Chausson, you know, Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson. You're probably right in that one of those or two of those guys were guys that they were going to take. And then, like, when they saw it get to the Vikings and only Justin Jefferson was left, they probably figured, or maybe even they talked to the Vikings and they knew Justin Jefferson was going to go there. All these guys are going to be gone that they otherwise would have taken. So they said, all right, forget it. We'll just get out.
It's an interesting theory, you know, if, you know, the pick is in and then the Patriots like, all right, we're out of here. But was Bill Belichick going to go wide receiver in the first round 2 years in a row? I don't know if I buy that, you know. So I figured, you know what, you know, the Patriots defense was the best in the league last year. Bill lost a lot of pieces there. He's like, you know what, that's the formula. You know, we don't need excellent quarterback play, which they didn't last year, to go 12-4, 11-5, or whatever the record was. I forget already. I want to forget last season. You know, just how spoiled we are. Yeah, double-digit wins. Forget that season. It was awful. As Patriots fans is what I'm saying. So anyway, they trade to the Chargers. They drop back 14 selections. They only get the 37 and a third. Listen, guys, I don't know if I'm being too harsh. You guys can stop me, but I'm on this hating spree with Bill Belichick. So tell me to slow my roll if need be. But this guy, the GM, is not good. You know, we talked about Gronk, you know, with the fourth round pick, whatever. It's free money. He was out of retirement. You get what you can get. Walter, you even said, you know, initial thought, we could have done a little bit better with this one. You need a pick from next year, along with, you know, I believe 37, 71 to get into the first round, that draft capital in the first round. Obviously the Chargers took Herbert at 6, but to get back into the first round for the LA Chargers, I was looking at least for a pick from next year as well, a mid-round pick. Not that, you know, I'm all hot and bothered by fourth round picks, but you know, just maximize your assets. And you know, it probably goes farther than this, honestly, but it goes back to Jimmy Garoppolo, you know, not to bring it up, but you know, just not maximizing the assets. And you know, it just seems like it's the Belichick, the GM, is having a tough time these days. He's very average, because we're used to seeing Bill Belichick, the coach, be leaps and bounds above every other coach. it seems like BB, the GM, is just like everyone else, maybe even a little bit below average. So that's my little take on, Belichick, the GM, and all his trade backs and not getting as much as he can. What would you guys say to that?
Yeah, I'll go from here. I was thinking last night, it's almost like going through social media. It almost reminds me of like the NBA trade deadline with a lot of Celtics fans, and how we had a bunch of assets and picks and stuff like that. And it's almost like fans just wanted to see a trade just to see a trade, and who knows if that trade made us better or not. I feel like a lot of Patriots fans wanted to see the Patriots just use the first round pick. I believe when we were chatting yesterday, I don't believe the Patriots had Kenneth Murray in for a meeting or something along those lines, or some sort of virtual meeting or whatever. But
That's right.
It's almost like Patriots fans just wanted to see the Patriots take the pick just to make the pick. And if Belichick feels that, maybe it was a reach at 23 to take this guy that maybe has a true talent at, say 38, 39 for, prospect ranking, we can trade down to 37 and still get that guy, assuming he falls to us. So it almost would have been like not a great value pick. So trading down, you get another pick, and you can still possibly get the guy that you want early in the second round. I think that's a pretty good move there. But again, we have to wait to see who Belichick actually takes in that position in the second round.
Yeah, I think, Mason, you're being a little bit unfair to Belichick and Caserio, just in that we're still talking about two guys that in the last 8 years have built 3 Super Bowl champions. So, I think the last couple off seasons, they have hit a little bit of a rough patch. I mean, but Isaiah Wynn looks like a good pick. He just had trouble staying on the field. Now, if that continues, then we're going to have to look at that as a bad pick. Sony Michel helped them win a Super Bowl. Was not the same guy last year, though. So I think the jury's still out there, which is a fair criticism. And then N'Keal Harry, I think when N'Keal Harry had the ball in his hands last year, I thought he was awesome. The problem is he could not get on the same page enough, and he was hurt part of the time, so he didn't get the ball in his hands enough. So I think that, when we look at them, I still believe that they're going to be able to continue this thing going, but they also are going to have their feet held to the fire a little bit because they took away their margin for error in Tom Brady. I mean, we've looked at, we talked on previous podcasts where like 2003 and then 2009 and 10, 2012 and 13, they've had these stretches where they'll have a year or two where they'll have the best draft in the NFL. And those couple of years here and there, that's really sustained the dynasty. Not that they haven't picked good players in other years, but it's like, you look at where they were at the end of the 2008 season, they really were starting to turn the page. 2009, they bring in, Pat Chung, Sebastian Vollmer, Matt Slater. I'm not trying to give a history lesson here, but then 2010, they have a good draft and so on and so on. I think what we need to see is that they need to have, and I've said this before, another one of those drafts this year. And in not just this year, but in combination with 2018, 2019, and especially this year. So, I think that, and one other thing I think we could see, and we can talk about this a little bit if you want, is they've had a philosophy over the past 5 or 6 years where they've used a lot of mid-round picks to trade for veterans, right? They use mid-round, I'm talking, 3 through 6. They've used picks, we go back to Akeem Ayers, Jason McCourty, Kyle Van Noy, kind of the proven commodity over the higher risk, 4th or 5th round pick. And I'm wondering now, okay, they picked up, what do they have, 4 third-round picks now, 4 6th-round picks, right, a couple fourths. I wonder if over the course of today and tomorrow, we're going to see them bring in a couple additional veteran, players, or push them into next year and wait for it. It seems like a philosophical thing they've been doing ever since really that 2011 CBA limited some rookie development and practice time.
Right. That'll be very interesting to see the next couple of days. But, I mean, I look at 2017, for example, when they only had 4 official draft picks. Obviously, they trade 1 for Brandon Cooks. They trade 2 for that Panthers player in the Super Bowl whose name I'm forgetting.
Coney Ely.
Coney Ely.
That was a big miss.
He didn't even make the 53-man, I believe. And then
I think a 2nd-round pick was one of those 2 picks, too. Or maybe it was like a 3rd and a 4th. But you're right. Yeah, they gave up a lot.
There was Dwayne Allen who had stone hands. So, yeah, that didn't work out very well. But I think the reason why I'm so harsh is because I'm with you. And we talked about this last week. This needs to be, if not a home run, very close to it for the Patriots to sustain in this draft to sustain their success moving forward. Kind of
well, and I think, if you look at it, who are their really good young players right now? You look at their roster, they don't have a huge crop. I mean, okay, if you want to count Joe Tooney as a young player still, if you want to count David Andrews, they're good. I think Isaiah Wynn is good, but then Sony Michel has been inconsistent. Jury's still out on N'Keal Harry. Defensively, okay, I like Adam Butler, but everybody in their secondary is older than 27 except J.C. Jackson. And J.C. Jackson, I think, is good, but it's not like he's, this high-end player yet. He could be. But to me, we aren't looking at a core of a lot of really good young players. Like when they won in 2014, even 2016, you saw a lot of guys either in their prime or just about entering their prime. And right now we see a lot of guys in their prime, but also at the tail end of their prime. So I think we're on the same page that this has to be a strong draft because they have to infuse a lot of good young talent into this team and really get a new good young core of players.
There you go. Well said. This obviously it turned into a Patriots segment like it always does. We talk about the NFL draft and it goes there, but well said. There's John Lyons. I'm Mason Souza, Walter Sabina as well. Again, just want to mention we are on, this is a podcast version. If you're watching on YouTube simulcasting, we are on Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and check out Vimeo, Straight Facts Homie, for our past shows as well. We will be doing a recap of part 2 of the NFL draft in just a couple days. Obviously, as we're recording today on a Friday, we will get to recapping the NFL draft as a whole. But that wasn't the rest of the fun, or maybe from a league-wide perspective, guys. The Green Bay Packers on the clock. They trade up to take the first offensive player in 9 seasons. You're like, all right, so something to compliment Devontae Adams. Maybe Aaron Jones has a little bit of an injury history. Maybe another running back. Maybe a tight end. Is Rodgers going to use the tight end for the first time in a long time? Obviously, there's Jimmy Graham. But no, they take a quarterback. And just like how Brett Favre was 35 when the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers, look who's 35, Mr. Aaron Rodgers himself, and the Packers take Jordan Love. How's Aaron Rodgers gonna like this one? Do you think he's gonna call up his new teammate right away and say, "Hey, welcome to Green Bay"?
Right. I was pretty surprised, because even though you look, okay, it's the same franchise that did this with Brett Favre, but I think if you go back and look at the Brett Favre situation, if I remember right, he had kind of mentioned publicly about retirement a couple times about, hey, I'm getting near. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something like, I'm getting near the end. Whereas Rodgers has said, hey, I want to play till I'm 40. And Rodgers has been really good. Yep. I know 2 years ago he wasn't, it wasn't quite the same in the Packers offense, and they got the new coach this year, but we're talking about a team that was, a few possessions away from going to the Super Bowl. So it's not like we're talking about a team that went 8-8 and needs to turn the page. I was really surprised at this. I think Rodgers himself said we haven't taken a skill position guy in 15 years. And now, they take one, and it's, probably not at the right position if you're Aaron Rodgers. So to me, yeah, Jordan Love's probably a project, and maybe they're envisioning we're going to develop this guy for 2 or 3 years, and when Rodgers is 38, we're going to let him go and go with Jordan Love. And if that's the case, I'm okay with it. But I also feel like you could have gotten a different quarterback who you could have developed in the second round or next year's first round. So, I mean, and the other thing too is Aaron Rodgers, his contract, it's not like you're going to be able to trade him if you really like Jordan Love in a year. You're stuck with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, unless somebody is willing to take on a lot of money or the Packers are willing to have a lot of dead cap. I was really surprised that they were willing not only to take him in the first round, given that Rodgers wants to play 5 more years and is still playing well, but also that they use capital to trade up to do it. So, not only should Rodgers be a little frustrated, but like if I'm Devontae Adams or I'm one of, a defensive player, does this really help me in the next 2 years win a Super Bowl? I mean, unless they're flipping Jordan Love, or Jordan Love is the next Andrew Luck and they're going to flip Rodgers and get a bunch of great players, this doesn't help them win a Super Bowl in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I'm surprised with the pick of Jordan Love, but I'm even more surprised that the Green Bay Packers traded up, 4 picks to take Jordan Love. I mean, you look at their offense this year, it was Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams with Jimmy Graham sprinkled in, maybe a bit of Geronimo Allison, but they haven't had a true, surplus of skill position players back since the early 2010s when you had Donald Driver, Greg Jennings, a couple other guys I'm missing. But look at what Aaron Rodgers did with that talent, and look what Aaron Rodgers is doing despite not having talent. He's still dragging this team to the NFC Championship game, Matt LaFleur's first year, and even in years past, finishing 7-9, 8-8, struggling. And even when he was out with his collarbone injury, when Deshaun Kaiser was starting games, they were getting blown out of the water. So just to see what Aaron Rodgers could do if you put a bit of talent around him, he would really make them improve. And obviously he's been advocating for it. Give me a couple more weapons to go alongside Devontae Adams, and we can really make something happen. To see Matt LaFleur make this pick, I don't know what it says about Matt LaFleur's thoughts on Aaron Rodgers. He's 35. Yes, he's getting up there in age, but we're seeing the way the rules are changing in the game. Brady is in his 40s. Drew Brees is in his 40s. You expect like all these younger quarterbacks to be playing more into their 40s the way the rules have changed and they're more favored towards the quarterback. It's just really surprising. I was scratching my head as a Green Bay Packers bandwagon fan to see why they would take Jordan Love instead of another wide receiver like a T. Higgins out of Clemson or something like that.
Yeah, and I think one thing I really want to know is why they felt the need to trade up. Because if you look at the teams, right, so the Packers trade up to 26 to get him. Look at the teams after that. Well, the next pick is the Seahawks. They're not going to take a quarterback. After that's the Ravens. They're not going to take a quarterback. The Dolphins had already taken one. So then it's like, were they afraid Tennessee was going to jump up? But then they just gave Ryan Tannehill a lot of money. So I'm wondering if there was another team, maybe it was the Titans, maybe it was New England. Maybe it was another team that they heard whispers wanted to trade up to that spot. Because if you look at the teams that picked around there, not really a lot of places for a quarterback. So I'm thinking that maybe Jordan Love was one of those under-the-radar, high demand. I mean, we knew that he would be in somewhat high demand, but maybe there was a quiet, almost bidding war and multiple teams interested, and that's why the Packers felt to do it. Because I agree with you, Walter. I found it strange they picked him, but to trade up, I was really scratching my head at why trade up. And that's the only reason I can figure is that maybe they got some whiff of somebody else wants him, and maybe it was our friends in New England.
John, I think you're onto something. I don't know if it was New England, but I'm seeing a lot of the Indianapolis Colts were thinking
that's
of
another team, yeah, because even there, Phillip Rivers is only on a 1-year deal.
Right, absolutely. So that could have been they could have got win, but Walter, I hate to break it to you, but this ain't gonna go over well. We thought this was tension in year one with Matt LaFleur coming in and Rodgers maybe like, listen, you know what, new guy, I'll throw you a bone. We're gonna get through this together. And now year two, we were talking about before the show. He was on Pat McAfee's podcast. How many years since the Packers didn't draft a skilled player in the first round? Was it a decade and a half, 15
I think it was
years?
15 years, yeah.
15 years. And the skilled player that they technically do take is Rodgers' replacement, apparently. And I believe Rodgers said this in the past, like, listen, like, Tom Brady, not to say he's like his motivation, but for how long he's played, his tenure, his longevity. Like, I want to play as long as Tom Brady. So that's I'm pretty sure there's no 7-year first round contracts for players.
Right.
So something's got to give, whether it's this season, next season, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. At this point, I can totally see Aaron Rodgers playing quarterback for another team. Maybe not the same way Brett Favre did, but in the end, maybe the same way Tom Brady is right now playing with another team. So when that day comes, they'll be a very interesting as well. But John, you were mentioning, how does this affect the team? Maybe it's a quote unquote Jimmy G effect. The Patriots take Jimmy G in the second round of 2014, and that lit a fire under Tom Brady, and he has some of his best ball of his career with Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup. So
I think this is even a bigger deal because, like, you look at the Patriots, they made a first-round pick that year. They waited for Jimmy G to fall to them. The Packers traded up in the first round. It's like look, the Patriots obviously drafted Jimmy G with the idea he's going to replace Brady. We all know that. But like I said, they still picked a player at 29. They waited all the way to the end of the second round. The Packers were aggressive in round one. And I think if all the teams in the NFL, the Packers have the most riding on the first 5 or 6 weeks of next season because they didn't play that well in the NFC Championship game. They were a few possessions away, like I said, but they didn't play that great. And if they come out after drafting a QB in round one and they don't start well, it's going to be really tough for Matt LaFleur there with some of those guys. So I think, not to get into a season preview yet, but they've definitely kind of made their bed, so to speak. We're going to have to see how they lay in it come September.
Yep. And there's two quick points from me. I would have been fine. Obviously, we look at the way they need to address needs at skill position. I would have been fine if they continued building on defense. I believe they had 2 first-round picks or first and early second. They ended up taking 2 defensive players to bolster up their defense. Even if they went defense again and then went skill positions rounds after that, I would have been fine with it. But Aaron Rodgers is probably calling up Matt LaFleur right now saying, you better use the rest of these picks on nothing but skill position players to give me some weapons out there. So we'll see how they address the rest of the draft. And then just point number 2, Jordan Love has a very similar skill set to Aaron Rodgers. He can extend plays with his legs, make the throw downfield, does sort of everything similar to Aaron Rodgers in terms of, legs and extending plays, rolling out to the sidelines, making those throws. So if they went with a quarterback with like a different type of skill set, more of a pocket passer, maybe Aaron Rodgers could look at that, say maybe Matt LaFleur wants to do this and, go a different route. But if you're drafting a quarterback with the same skill set as Aaron Rodgers, I think that's a big question mark and a big red flag for Aaron Rodgers.
We have 2 rounds left in the NFL draft, and John, I believe you mentioned it before. You're talking about how the Patriots use those mid-round picks, 3 to 6, to get a veteran player. Maybe Aaron Rodgers loses his mind so much and says, "Trade me," and then your new quarterback of the New England Patriots, Aaron Rodgers. See, Bill Belichick had a plan all along. He knew this was going to happen. So, guys, I believe that's it. That's the first round mock, or a recap of the first round, I should say. One of my other notes is no excuses for the Cowboys now. CD Lamb falls to them with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. They were 1 or 2, I believe, in yards last year. That better not be a fluke this upcoming season. And, again, no excuses for the Cowboys anymore. They should be winning that division with ease, I should say. Any other final remarks on the first round as we get back?
You had mentioned the same thing for the Cleveland Browns too, with their first round pick of an offensive tackle,
I did,
Baker Mayfield, those weapons there. So we'll see how that team develops.
Not so much confident in the Cleveland Browns, but obviously there's still 6 more rounds of the NFL draft to get through. There you go, gentlemen. It was a pleasure. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. This is the Straight Facts Homie podcast edition. We will obviously be doing a TV version, recapping the NFL draft. You can find that on Vimeo, on our Facebook and Twitter pages, Straight Facts Homie. And there you go. My name is Mason Souza. There's John Lyons. There's Walter Sabina. Pleasure to be here. Enjoy the rest of the NFL draft. Talk to you next time.